different than research. I mean, they're related, right? Because if you cure disease, you extend life. But there's also research focused on the mechanisms and the biology and the biochemical nature of the cell and how to extend life. That they clearly advocate that no money should be spent on that, and indeed that the FDA, if drugs came about, its only benefit was, let's say, to fix the cells so that you actually lived longer. That they said that should not be approved by the FDA. And they give a whole list of reasons. You know, it's playing God, you know, because they're religious. But the point is that you're giving those principles to politicians rather than the marketplace. Now, with regard to this university, yes, it is a government-run school. As are most of the universities in the United States, even the private ones today, because the government is so involved in student loans and student grants and everything else, they abide by, by government rules. And I think that I think that the fact that faculty, for example, are so politically left on the university campus, and this is not, just look at how they vote. This is not really debatable, it's a statistical fact. It has a lot to do with that fact, because no private enterprise would actually create a system of tenure like they exist at public universities, and that is spread to private because they can't compete really once you have a tenure system. They can't get the best people unless they also adopt a tenure system. They can't. So the tenure system is a product of basically a semi-government monopoly over education. Yes, a lot of good stuff happens, and there's some good public schools. But this is not what government is about. This is not the role of government. This is, there's some people who work for the post office and deliver the mail, okay. But it's not optimal, and it's not right. It's not right if I don't send my kids to public education to tax me in order to fund somebody else's public education. It is morally wrong to force me. I see your hand. And if you wave 5 hands, it's not going to make it any more visible. Let me answer your question.
But I want to interject.
I don't want you to interject. I'll let you ask a follow-up question.
I will.
Education would be miles better, 1,000 times better, if not for state intervention. Just like the computer business is much better for the fact that government doesn't intervene in it. Or there's very little intervention in it. Any business, if you look at it.
ARPANET?
What?
The internet comes from ARPANET. It was a government project.
It was a Defense Department project which would have gone nowhere other than for private enterprise entering the system and creating what we today know as the World Wide Web. And it wasn't that some bureaucrat had a vision for Amazon and created an internet and then popped Amazon. Question of principle, and the principle is that you don't use force in order to achieve aims. Even if you could prove to me that the University of Washington was the best university in history, the best university that ever could be, that there couldn't be anything better, it still doesn't legitimize me being forced to subsidize.
In favor of limited government as well, but I kind of have a problem with maybe the 1890s, the Gilded Age, just because, fingers in meat and child labor and things like that. I don't know if that's was that a byproduct of unbridled capitalism, or would that have been eventually self-correct?
So child labor, what was the other one?
Like fingers in meat.
Fingers in meat. Okay, let me do child labor because I know something about child labor, and I'll try to do fingers in meat a little. So I find child labor a fascinating topic because it's so ahistorical. It so lacks any real sense of history. So what was the world like before the Industrial Revolution? Most people, 80–90% of the population, lived on farms. Most people were subsistence farmers. And most people had lots of kids, most of whom died. And the ones who remained did what? Worked. And what kind of hours did they work? Very long hours. They didn't go to school. There was no school system. The parents didn't have enough wealth in order to let the kids lay around. They had large families, partially because they needed a workforce and partially because many of the kids were going to die by the time they reached 20. So if you hope for some kids into middle age, then you better have a lot, just for the statistics to play in your favor. That's like before the Industrial Revolution. Now comes about the Industrial Revolution, and the characteristic of the Industrial Revolution is it creates massive amounts of jobs. It's a kind of a paradox, right? Machines actually created more jobs, many more jobs than they destroyed because they were mechanizing stuff, because they invented all this stuff. So now these people in the farmland who are living barely surviving hear about jobs in the city that are paying better than what they could do staying on the farm. So they go to the city. And the kids who used to work on the land now go to work in the factory, because it's still true that the parents don't have enough money to send their kids to school or to keep them around the house just lazing around. They need the money. And what happens during the 19th century is amazing. Child mortality goes way down. That is, the kids stop living, right? They don't die. And yes, they work hard, and if you've read Dickens, you know, life is rough, but they live. They live. They don't die. And what happens in the late part of the 18th century, 1890s and 1900, 1910, is that slowly the parents now, because of the Industrial Revolution, because of mechanization, because of all that, are much more productive, making more money, creating more wealth. Remember, this is wealth that's coming out of nowhere, right? Coming out of the ideas of people, because this isn't wealth that was stolen from somewhere. Britain didn't become rich on somebody else's back, they just became rich because they produced stuff. So here's this wealth. Now the parents can afford, for the first time in human history, can afford to stop sending their kids to work. And what you see starting in the 1880s is a slow decline in child labor until it goes away. And then the politicians wake up and pass laws against it. There's no way they would have passed laws against it. For the same reason, today Indonesia and Malaysia and other parts of the world don't pass laws against child labor, because they would kill these kids. These kids would die. That's the option this kid in Malaysia has. Work in a sweatshop or die. And us Westerners, living in our fancy homes, the comfortable life, with wealth that was created because of that Industrial Revolution, we sit at home and say, no, children shouldn't work. But children have always worked. Throughout human history, children have worked. They just changed facilities to a much safer place. Right? So, child labor goes away because parents don't want kids to work. Right? Any of you parents, you know that. I'm a parent. You know, I want my older kids to work. Hopefully at some point they'll stop working soon. But now when they're little, that's what stopped child labor. And it's inevitable. And if you look at every culture that goes through the process of taking an agrarian society and moving into an industrial society, there is a period in which there is child labor. Fingers in meat. I doubt it was a prevalent phenomena. I know, what's his name, wrote the famous book about meat packing. Upton Sinclair. A lot of books were written about that period. I don't know, I've never studied that book in particular, but the other books that I've studied are full of lies. Look, even there, standards of sanitation have to evolve. It's not that one day